Hello, welcome. So you're not imagining it, this is a speed test. My name is Ricardo. This is going to be a live coding session. It's no presentations, and I'm relying on the Wi-Fi, so please pray for me that the Wi-Fi goddess is smiling kindly. So put your hands up if you have been using AI coding tools to do vibe coding. Oh, wow, that's good. At least half of you. So this session, I'm going to share what I've learned over the last year and a half of using AI coding tools, some of the tricks of how to use them effectively. For those that didn't put their hands up, I'm hoping that you will maybe learn a few things that you can use as you maybe experiment. So I like to try and build an application. We live in a world of uncertainty, so I'm going to build a fact-checking application where we can kind of like make sure that we understand where we are. So I'm going to, I've already got a directory, there is nothing in here. And I'm going to be using, so there's a bit of an echo here, so apologies if the sound quality is not so good. I'm going to try and make the screen bigger, so for those of you back, apologies if you can't see it, but I think that's about as big as I can go. So I'm hoping that that's going to be big enough. Now, whilst I'm going to be using this tool, a lot of the techniques you can use for any other AI coding tool. I use several, and I keep experimenting with several to see and experiment how one tool is maybe better or worse than the other. So the first tip, okay, the first thing that as a developer you need to do, okay, is make sure that the tool you're using is configured to your preferences, right? Because when I speak to developers, every developer has their own preferences over various things, whether it's tabs or spaces, programming languages. Who here believes Vim is the best editor? Hands up. No one. What? I'm in the wrong room. Okay, so okay, for the record, Vim is the best editor, right? So how do we do that, right? All AI coding tools have got this concept of a rules file. Now, this particular tool, we do this through something called an agent steering. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create something called my coding preferences. And I am not going to I'm not going to make you watch me typing. I've actually got a lot of this stuff already prepared. But I'm going to just before I do this, I'm going to show you why we need this. So let's put this in here. I'm going to ask a very general question, which is, show me all the cities of Lithuania. Actually, let's, oh no, I don't want to do that. Okay. So we can see here that it's provided me with a list in Python and in JavaScript. But as good as the previous session was, I'm not a JavaScript person, right? So for me, it's got to be Python, Java, or PHP, or I'm not interested. So I create this thing called a rules file. At the top, we define where we want it applied. We can always apply it. We can manually apply it. We can maybe apply it only when a file is a certain extension like Python. And then we have a bunch of rules, and these rules are what we care about. The first mistake I see people doing is going to cursor directory, copying these huge rules files and collecting them and then creating these rule files that are 400, 500, 600 lines long. You really want to make sure that your rules file is as small as possible, okay? Even though the AI coding models that these editors are using have got large context windows of 200,000, 1 million, even 2 million. The research from Stanford University shows that after 20K, the AI coding systems, the models, just forget, right? So there's no point having these large context, these rules files, because they're not effective. Shorter, smaller ones are way more effective. So start small and build out, or take something and reduce it to the bare minimum based on the work you're doing. And have lots of them. So I have collected a whole bunch of these things, right, for different activities I do. And then I configure steering documents in and out based on the task I'm doing. Super important, okay? So create a rules file, make sure the rules file isn't too big, it's just right for the task we're doing. We're going to be building some code, vibe coding, so that should be okay. Now, if I do the same prompt, now that I've got my rule, make sure that's then. I'm going to see, this time it should only show me Python and specific Flask. Nope. Of course, the demo god is not smiling on me. Let's do another session and try that prompt again. And this time it's picked up my preference file and it's only going to give me Python and some Flask, okay? And this means that every time the AI coding tool is going to do something, it's going to respect the rules in there. We'll see that throughout the rest of the session as we build this application. Now, the next thing I'm going to show you is something pretty cool, which is specific just to this IDE. So actually, I don't think I mentioned the IDE. The IDE I'm using is Kiro. It's a fork of VS Code. What makes it unique is it allows us, it's the first IDE that does spec-driven development, which I'll come to later. But it's also got some cool features where we can use AI agents to automate some of the things we do as developers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a hook. And what I'm doing, one of the things I'm really bad at remembering is every time I create a new file to put the copyright header. And this is the sort of thing that LLMs are really good at, right? Writing English. So I'm going to basically say, create me a hook that adds a copyright header and also puts an SPDX header for open source. So I'm an open source person. And what it's going to do is actually going to create a header. It's going to create a hook. And hooks are event driven. So we can create hooks either when a file is created, saved, or deleted. And then we can run it runs a prompt, effectively. And here we're basically saying anytime it's a Python file, we could configure it for any file we wanted. So I've now got this hook, and what it's going to do is every time the editor is going to be creating files, it's going to run that prompt for me automatically without me having to do anything, and then add that copyright header. Now, you may be thinking, well, I could do that myself. It's not too big a deal. Maybe. But again, what I've done is I've corrected some examples of kind of the things that you might want to do, might want to automate that maybe you don't always. Imagine having a hook that automates the documentation as you're coding, as you're building new features, it updates the document. You don't have to do anything. It just does it for you. Maybe you create multiple language versions of your documentation. Again, you can automate these things, right? I'll share these resources afterwards so people can get can get them if they want to. So I've now got this hook and I've got my steering file. These just are files that live in my project file state, so I can check them in via source control. So I've already now got a pretty good starting point, right? Which is where we want to be. As a developer, before we start doing tasks, we want to get into a position where our tool is set up, optimized for the task we are doing. So now it comes to the application, okay? One of the things I've learned speaking to other developers is that the most important thing as a developer when you're using AI coding tools that you will have to master is context engineering. Put your hand up if you're familiar with context engineering. Okay, a few, right. So context engineering is the ability to make sure that you provide information with your prompt so that the LLM understands what it needs to do, okay? LLMs are stateless, which means that they're only as good as the information you give them. So it's really, really important if you're building an application that you give them the right context. The coding preferences is an example of context. We've given the AI coding tool now our standards. It will get sent every time we make a request. Now, one of the best ways of providing context when you're building applications is to provide the data model. And typically that is something that you might do first of all. So I found that when I do this, the code that gets generated afterwards tends to be more repeatable, more reusable, and more aligned to actually my data model. And likewise, I can change the data model and ask it to update code. I can update the code and ask it to update my data model. Now, next tip. As developers, we like solving problems. Sometimes those problems might be over a whiteboard. Sometimes we might have some documentation about an application data model, but we don't have the code. So what we can do is we can actually use images as part of our prompt. So here, for example, I've got a sample can't actually show it very clearly. A very simple data model, ERD diagram, okay? And what I can do is using a simple prompt, which is generate the data model in SQL format from the ERD diagram, and then create a file in the data model directory called factchecker.sql. So when you're using AI coding tools, don't limit yourself just to text, because if you go through your documentation, you're going to find lots of images, maybe an architecture diagram, okay? You can use that architecture diagram as context for your AI coding tool, and it will be able to use it. It might, for example, be able to generate some infrastructure as code to build your infrastructure from a diagram. So we now have our data model, okay? So we have a users table, we have categories, we have facts, we have votes, which looks pretty similar. Votes. Normally you'd spend more time than you have that I've got at the moment. But you get the idea, right? So using images is super important. We can actually see also that my hook has been in action, and it's added my copyright header and my Apache 2 SPDX header. Right, so we're in a good situation now. We've got some good foundation. We're going to build our application. The next tip is actually around prompts. Making sure you've got the right prompt is super important. I'm going to stop this before it runs. Now this at the level, at face level, looks like it's an okay prompt. It's very specific. It has a number of details that are important. And I would expect this is the minimum that you would use when you're vibe coding a prompt. But how I can make this even better is by using the AI coding assistant itself. So I'm going to do the same prompt, but I actually start, before I do this, I actually say, can you review the following prompt and suggest areas where it could be improved? I want the prompt in EARS format. EARS format is Easy Application Requirement Syntax. It came out of Rolls-Royce 20 years ago, so it's not new. And it was created to try and simplify how we articulate, how we communicate requirements from the business to the developers. And it turns out that actually it's a really nice way of trying to communicate with an LLM. So we've now converted our initial prompt into something that actually is more readable, more detailed, but more importantly, the LLM will be able to use more effectively to create consistent code. Now, the temptation here, okay, might be to say, okay, well, great, let's start building code. Not quite. All right? What we're going to do is we're going to kind of take a step towards spec-driven development, okay? We're going to ask it to write this new improved prompt into a file, okay? So it doesn't matter what the file's called. I'm just calling it code plan. You can call it anything you want. And it's actually going to just take that prompt and now put it into a markdown document, which I can actually go and review and make sure that it looks good. So let's get rid of that. So you can see, well, I don't need the headers on this file, that there are some common requirements. Use the data model, make sure the web is accessible in the browser. You can see it's written in a very specific language, which we'll come to when we do the spec-driven development. So typically we would review this, and we would make sure that it looks like what we're doing, or what we want to do. And actually this looks pretty okay. So let's save that. And we can actually now ask it to build the software. So I've got a prompt here which basically says review that. Let's do Control-Shift-P, reindex. And what I say is review the implementation plan in the planning directory and follow the instructions to build the application. And what it's going to do now, if the demo goddess is kind to me, is actually going to go through that and actually going to start writing some code. So we'll start seeing if it's working. So it's created the app directory. Again, that is important because when I specified my references, I wanted everything in the app directory. So it's already beginning to app source. It's already respecting my preferences as a developer. And of course, if you've got organizational preferences, you could put these in yourself. Now, this is going to take about 3 or 4 minutes. I'm not going to make you wait, okay? I'm going to do something different. Because as good as working on greenfield new projects is? Most likely, you are going to be working in existing code bases. So I've got a project here that I downloaded from GitHub. It's a book sharing application. It's quite nice. It gives you all the things you expect. It's a Python project, but if I wanted to maybe take this application and extend it, maybe add a new feature, which is quite a common requirement you might get, the AI coding assistant knows nothing about this application. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to do some context engineering to build that foundation to make the AI coding assistant more likely to produce good code. And within this IDE, we have this thing called generate steering documents. So we can click on that. And what this is going to do is it's going to fire off the LLM. It's going to review the artifacts within this project, and it's going to generate 3 files. The first one is going to be called product. And what the product does is it tells in a markdown document what it thinks this application does. After that, it's then going to produce something called tech, which is the tech stack. So it will provide a detailed layout of frameworks, libraries, versions, the data model, that kind of thing. And then finally, it's going to create a structure, which is going to basically be what's the layout of this project. Okay, and we can see this has already started doing this. So we can see it's a book sharing application, which it is. Looks okay. We can see the structure. Oops. The ID will behave. Looks okay to me. And then we've got the tech, which again, it's a Flask application. So this now, if I was to basically ask it to create a new feature, add a new page. I want to add a contact us with minimal details, telephone and email. What it's going to do is actually going to pick up this from the steering documents. It's going to pick up those 3 artifacts that were created, and it's going to use those to actually know how to basically respect the existing technology and build on top of that. So we can see that it's actually now made some additions. So that looks good to me. It's added a new route in the Flask. It's created a new contact page, and it's added that. If I can stop that, if I can catch it. It's added a new navigation item into the application, which is what I expected. Okay. And that's it. So it's made that change really, really quickly. If you've got more complex applications, then those steering files are really, really important. Now, again, another tip. When you're using AI coding tools, quite often they will produce stuff that you don't like, okay? And you will want to undo the changes. Find out how your tool works. At the minimum, what you should be doing is making sure you initialize via Git your project, first of all. And if all else fails, don't commit that change and revert your project back to the initial state through Git. However, most AI coding tools now provide you the ability to provide a checkpoint. So I can click on Restore here, and it's going to take me back to the file system before the AI made any changes, right? And I can, bless you, and I can make some changes here. I can confirm, and now my project is back to the state it was. Do not trust the AI to undo the changes for you through a prompt, because your results will vary. And I've been chatting to a few people today, and normally you end up in this situation where hours and hours later you try and find out where you got back to. So back to the original application build. Okay, we have now generated some code. Oh, it's actually created a start script for me. That's nice. I wasn't expecting that. So let's see if this actually runs. Okay, let's have a look at the start script, shall we? Okay, so just doing UV. So again, in my preferences, I've recently moved from pip to UV to doing Python dependency management. It's definitely life-changing. Let's now see if this application works. UV run. Oop. With a bit of luck, let's see if it actually starts. Oh, no, that's definitely not going to work. Okay, right, well, it looks okay. Let's see if it actually works, though. Okay, so looks like we've got something. So let's create tech conferences. Let's create a new fact. Build stuff is awesome. And that looks okay. So what do we think? Do we think this is a fact? I think it's a fact, yeah. We're all here, so we love this thing, right? Okay, just to recap, what we've done is we've basically just run a very quick vibe coding session and shared some of the kind of the good practices around this, okay? But next good practice, okay? The code that AI generators produce, whilst has gone from being variable to now working, still has the tendency to hallucinate. So we need to make sure that we do some kind of security check. So there's a really cool open source project that, so I'm an open source guy. It's a really cool open source project called Automated Security Helper, which you can configure as an MCP server and runs a whole bunch of open source security tools on your repo. So what we're going to do is we're going to configure MCP, which we can do through here. And I've actually got the configuration somewhere because that would take too long to configure. Save, and let's close some of these tabs. And it should now start loading up my Ash MCP server. Let's move this up here. Can we move this? No, I can't. How do I move that? Okay, it doesn't matter. So I'm going to basically right-click, and I'm going to enable all tools. Do not do this yourself. It's only for the demos. I don't want to be paused. And now I can, through a very simple prompt, ask Ash to do a security scan on the app source folder. And because I've auto-approved the tools, it's not going to... Oh, no, it didn't. So, okay. Let's trust it then. Why did it not do that? Did it? Maybe I forgot to do it. Okay, so what it's doing now, the reason why it's popped in me trust, it's obviously not worked when I've done it there. By default, when the AI coding assistants want to run a command, so execute something in your shell, write a file, delete a file, it's going to ask you for permission to do it once. However, if you feel sufficiently confident that you trust it to do it subsequent operations, you can trust it, right? Now, normally I wouldn't do that, but for demos, I'm going to let this go. So this is actually now running the scan in the background. And it shouldn't take too long, but it will ask me every now and then to do it. So we've got an application, we're working, but we haven't shipped it yet, okay? So we're going to basically shift gears to the CLI. How much time have I got? I think 38, so I think it's been 20 minutes, right? So I've got another 20 minutes left, I think. Okay, plenty of time to deploy to the cloud, right? Assuming my Wi-Fi works. So, I'm going to go to the project again. Key row. And this time I'm going to use the CLI version of the tool. So I'm a CLI person, and Kiro is available in the CLI. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a persona, okay? And the persona is going to be optimized for DevOps use cases. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that through agent, use a command called agent, create in the local, and I'm going to call it DevOps. Now, don't worry too much about the details of this. Effectively, what I'm doing is I'm creating my own personalized AI tool that will do something very specific. So in this instance, I want it to be really good at doing all DevOps stuff. So I'm going to give it a prompt. And the prompt, which again I've saved to make it, where is the prompt? Here we go. This is why Vim is the best editor, because because it is. So I've basically put a prompt. You are a senior DevOps engineer and back-end solutions developer with expertise in Terraform, Python, Bash scripting, etc. I'm now going to configure some MCP servers. And what I'm going to configure is Terraform, AWS documentation, and Finch. Now, Finch is probably something that's not that popular, or sorry, not common. It's an open source container tool like Podman Rancher. I don't run Docker on my machine, so I use that. So actually, I've just forgotten to do one thing. Edit DevOps. And I need to create context files. So I'm going to use the same context files that when we were building the application, we configured. So I need to put that in there as well. Okay. So now I quit out of this, and I'm going to start it again. This time I'm going to start it with the agent DevOps, which is the configuration specifically for DevOps. Okay, so that's starting. It's loading the MCP server. So I'm going to go back to here, run this. It's going to get the scan progress. Hopefully it's finished by now, because it's been running in the background. It normally takes a couple of minutes to produce the report. But hopefully, when we produce a report, it's going to tell us that our application doesn't have any serious issues. Because if it does, it's back to the drawing board. Okay, here we go. So scan results completed, no security issues found, which is good, right? When I did this morning, it generated about 5 serious issues, right? Which I thought, oh, not good. But we can see that it uses maybe some tools that you're familiar with, okay, if you're a Python developer. And it checks not only the code quality, but also checks things like Docker files, Kubernetes manifests. It will also do things like CloudFormation templates, CDK or Terraform, and check those for common issues, configuration issues, security issues, right? But with this, we've got some confidence. So whatever tool you're using, make sure you have something configured like this so that you can always carry on shifting left. And I could create, for example, a hook that every time I do a code, automatically runs that in the background so that I'm constantly getting my new codes updated. Okay, right, so let's have a look. Have my MCP servers loaded? My MCP servers have loaded. So I'm going to now create a new prompt that's going to use the MCP servers I've configured, refer to the documentation, that the AWS documentation MCP server for the latest documentation, use the Terraform MCP server so it knows how to build Terraform, and use the Finch MCP server so it packages and builds everything for Finch, which I'm running. And I want to package this up as a container, push it to AWS, and deploy it on Amazon ECS, because that's the best container service in my view. Even though I'm an open source person, as much as I love Kubernetes, ECS is so simple. And I'm going to deploy it to Stockholm, because Stockholm is nearer here than Dublin, and so it should be quicker. So let's now just do that. And again, very similar to the other editor, it has a chat interface. It's going to ask me to, when it wants to run a tool, it's going to ask me for permission, because we don't want to run these tools without making sure that we know what they're doing. So let's have a look. So it's actually reading all the files in the current project workspace. And now it's asking to use one of those MCP tools. And it's correctly picked up that I'm running an ARM processor. So it's looking for the ARM 64 ECS documentation. So this is going to now create the script. It doesn't normally take too long to do this, but I'm going to wait before I switch to make sure I don't pause it. We can see it's also updated the code, because the original code I had was bound to my local port on a fixed port, right? If I deploy this on container, what would happen is it would be still listening for that port, and the load balancer wouldn't be able to access it. It's created some, that looks good. That looks okay, although I want to include the end file. Does that look okay? That looks okay. So it's making some progress, and it should start building the Terraform now, because it's quite a straightforward infrastructure build. Okay, right. So whilst it's doing that, so far what I've showed you is kind of vibe coding. But we're kind of like in the kind of cusp of a kind of new era, okay? Which, let's have a look. It's doing the chest script. So let's have a look. It's in Spec. Where is it? Spec-driven. I've already started this process. Let's have a look. What's it doing there? Okay, trust. I've already started this process because when you move from vibe coding to spec-driven coding, whilst it's a very similar approach, it takes a lot longer to go through the process. So what I've done is I started, actually no, what I want to do is I'm going to just do that. Nope. I'm going to start the process by getting the prompt we originally had, which is building an application. Although this time I don't have the data model. And I'm going to hit return. And it's going to take my steering document, which I've already configured, and it's going to create a spec. And a spec actually looks, oh, hang on. No, I've done the wrong thing again. I forgot to do spec, that's why. This is what happens when you're trying to do too many things at the same time. Let's do that. Okay, let's ignore, and for example, and project. Okay, let's try again. Right, okay, spec mode, that's better. Okay, so I'm going to do the same prompt as we did before. It's still using my steering document, which I've pre-configured, but what will happen now is I've got a spec. And a spec is going to start a workflow. The first thing the workflow is going to do is create a requirements document, which it's working on at the moment. And the requirements document is again going to be in IS format, and should take not too long. And we can now go through this and make sure that we're happy with what actually we want built. Now, for this demo, I'm just going to basically accept. Normally, I would spend quite a bit of time fine-tuning that. The next stage is actually creating the design document. And here it's going to take a combination of my steering files, my context files, my preferences. And you can have, I've got one here, you can have as many as you want. But again, remember what I said, keep them small so you don't overload the context. And then it's going to take those steering documents together with your requirements and build out what it thinks is a good design. Let's make sure that this is still working. It's still doing stuff. And it's finished doing the script now, which is good. So it's finished the technical design, right? Let's actually look at what this looks like in Markdown preview. Which doesn't look any better actually. So we can see the technology stack is going with our preferences. It's got it's created its own data model, which again we might want to change, but for this demo I'm only going to just accept it. And once we're happy with the design, we can now progress to the next stage. But one of the things that sets this AI coding tool separate from all the others is it uses something called property-based testing. People familiar with property-based testing and the Hypothesis Python library? So what it does, okay, what property-based testing does is it takes your requirements and from your requirements builds out a set of tests which it can use to validate that code has been produced. Because one of the issues you have today with AI coding assistants is that they will tell you they've produced code based on something you've asked them to do, but they don't always produce the code. So what this allows the AI coding tool to do is bridge that gap. It will create these things called property tests, and when it actually comes to writing code, it writes the code to validate that based on a requirement, some code has been created. And this is the first tool that does that. So we can actually go back, and these are quite detailed, right? We can go through, and it tells you basically what the property is and which requirement it maps to. And we'll see in a second what that looks like. Now that I've got my design, I can now move into the implementation plan, which is where the tool will break down what needs to be built into small chunks, okay? And the reason why it does that is that AI coding tools work better when you scope down the work. Whilst it's doing that, we've actually got let's try our script out. I'm going to do test load. Actually, did I stop? Let's have a look. Did I make sure? Test local. Test local. And what this is going to do is it's going to, stop. Okay, so I can access this now already. Let's see if this is actually working. So I'm now running on a container, and the first part of that is working. So let's do, let's stop that now. Finch, remove, fact checker, test. We can actually, it's in running status. Okay, I think there's a force remove. Okay, it's not actually important. I'm going to do the deploy now, because deploy. And it's already built the container, so it should just, and this is where we're really going to be at the mercy of the Wi-Fi, because it's now going to push the container image. Well, first of all, the HashiCorp AWS module is huge, so it's downloading that. Anyone who's used that will know that. And then it's going to push the container image up there. So this is now going to take about 5 minutes, maybe a bit more, actually maybe 6-7 minutes. But at the end of it, we'll get a URL which is running on AWS, which we'll check. So we'll come back to this in a second. I just wanted to show you what the tasks look like with the spec-driven development. We can see now that we've got tasks. Okay, so each of these represent a piece of work, right? So again, we can complete tasks. If we're happy with them, we can move to the next task. If we're not happy with them, we can use those checkpoints to restore back and try again. Okay, I'm not going to go through implementing these because of the property-based testing. When you do each of these tasks, it takes a significantly longer amount of time to actually generate the code and validate the code for running. But I just wanted to give you kind of an idea of what spec-driven development looks like. It's kind of like, I mean, Kiro is the first IDE tool that has this built in, but there are other ways that you can use this if you're using other AI coding tools. So SpecKit is I think something that GitHub Copilot uses. The Claude have got their own as well. Tesla have got a bunch of stuff in this space. So there's emerging now frameworks for doing spec-driven development. So let me just close this. So whilst we're waiting for this to run, now is the time when I'm going to take any questions that you have, because I think we've got about 10 minutes, and then by the time the questions are finished, then this should have been deployed, and then we've shipped in 30 minutes, right? So who's got some questions about AI coding assistance that they would like me to answer? There's got to be a few, right? Who's going to be brave and have the first? Okay, like, what's your question?
How can you use these things in regulated environments?
So the question was, how can you use these tools in regulated environments? So that's a very good question. What I would say is that they are already being used in regulated environments. So I work with banks, telecoms, Ericsson, for example, hugely regulated segment. They are using these tools every day. Is there a specific concern that you have with why you asked the question?
I work in the medical industry, so it's considered extremely dangerous.
Yeah. So what you can do, if that is a concern, I mean, where does the danger comes from? Where? From the fact that it produces bad code, or the fact that the data is leaked somewhere else, or bad code? So ultimately, you as a developer are still responsible for the code that these produce, right? So even though I've been going through this very quickly, if I was doing this and I use these tools in my day-to-day work, I still have to own the code that the AI coding tool produces. So it's still my responsibility. There's no human not in the loop, right? So in that respect, it doesn't change anything. What's happening is you're making the code go faster. So the question is, how do you then understand the code that these produce? So this is where you use AI coding tools as a pair programmer. So a couple of the cool ways I'm seeing this happen is a developer will use the tool to generate some code, and then after it's generated the code, it will say, explain why you made this decision. Explain why what the code does here. Did you consider X when you were doing this? And by using the AI to introspect the code it's produced, the developer now has and builds up an idea of what is there, right? So it fixes and addresses the understanding. If the developer doesn't like what it's produced, it can ask the AI coding to refactor, using that checkpoint maybe to go back or to refactor from scratch. Either way, the developer still owns the outcome. So I don't see there being any difference to kind of like from the ownership perspective. I think where people are doing it maybe wrong is where perhaps the management of the company think that they don't need the developer anymore, right? And it's writing the code. And if they have that mindset, then we just need to educate them that this doesn't mean fewer developers. This means more developers. I like from the keynote this morning, right? I really like the oncology example, whereby using AI to scan medical images led to more radiologists, not less, right? And we are seeing now, I work with students, and we are seeing 2 or 3 times more students now are interested in tech because this has lowered the bar to starting and getting interested in tech. So it's an incredibly accessible technology, right? And it's lowering the bar of what it means to be a developer. So I think that's how I would approach it. But great question.
I would like to understand what's happening in the CLI. I understand that you basically, like, instead of creating like a deployment pipeline, you created an agent in place of the deployment pipeline. Is that a good way to?
So what I did, okay, I'll DevOps. So it's actually deployed. So we now have something in the cloud, but it's not going to work yet because it takes time to actually load. But let's answer this question. So what I did, okay, is that the CLI is very similar to the IDE tool, okay? It gives you the AI capabilities within the command line. But it gives me a bunch of commands, right? Commands to effectively either write scripts, maybe connect to a server and ask information about it. So one of the common use cases is going through logs is really difficult, right? Because you have to, as a human, understand everything that's coming through. So I can configure this to go through my CloudWatch logs and say, go through my CloudWatch logs and tell me about this application error that I'm seeing once a day. And it will go through, will download all the logs, and AI is really good at pattern matching, right? So it will then basically take that information and then give me an answer, which I can then respond with. But in the same way as when I just started my IDE, the IDE is very generic. With these kind of CLI versions, they also, out of the box, they're very generic. You can see here I've got a prompt, and I can do whatever I want with it. But if I switch to my DevOps, oh, hang on. Why did I not do that? Oh, it's because I'm in the wrong directory. Okay, 1 minute. Okay. So whilst that's doing that, I'm going to basically make sure this actually works so we can see that we've shipped to the cloud within the 30 minutes or 45 minutes. Okay. So hopefully, come on. Why is my Wi-Fi not working? Yay! So we are running in the cloud. Let's confirm that. And we can see there, look. So in 30 minutes, we've used an AI coding assistant and the CLI instance to build some software in a way that I'm confident you can repeat and reproduce over and over again, shared some good practices, and showed how you can use other tools, other AI-embedded tools like CLI to help package those up and deploy them. I'm around today. I've got a talk tomorrow as well. So if you've got any questions about AI coding assistance, then come find me. Thank you.